Hello again, I'm John Lord, and welcome to another demonstration of my workflow on doing surveys for a wildlife trust and producing a composite image from a number of still images looking straight down. Now, in the last example that I gave, we were fortunate in that we could see the ground on every point on all of the images, and that helped greatly when it was stitched together using PTGui. And in fact, PTGui had 100% success, which I have to say is somewhat rare. Normally you get quite a few images where you have to go in and add additional control points. Now, this reserve that we see on the screen now, which actually goes along this point here, down the bottom, and then up the side. So this area here is the area I've got to cover. Key difference here is that it's all trees. It's a woodland area. Now, PTGui does not stitch trees very well at all, and neither does it water. And it's quite obvious that in order to stitch, you need common points on adjacent images. And if you can't get those common points, then basically you can't stitch. And when you look down on trees, when the tree you're immediately above, you're seeing just the top of the tree, but the trees off to the left and the right and in front and behind, you're seeing at an angle. Consequently, when you move, you see the tree that was at an angle is now you're seeing the top of it, and the tree that you were overhead, you're now seeing at an angle. So it's very difficult in that situation to stitch together. But fortunately, PTGui has an option called Align to Grid, and that I found to be very, very useful indeed. Now, the downside is that you are not going to end up with a perfect stitched image. There are going to be stitching errors on it, but it is perfectly good for what I need to produce a composite image for reserve managers that they can work from. It certainly wouldn't be good for doing measurements on for survey work and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up my flight plan, and this reserve is called Old Broom, and there are my camera positions. Now, I'm going to be flying quite a bit lower because I want more detail, and from the charts that I produced, I know that flying at 200 feet, I need 150 feet horizontally and 150 feet horizontally and 100 feet vertically between my camera positions. Now, we've got a lot of images here, and we can't do it all in one flight because we have a limit of 99 waypoints on Litchi. And in addition, the flight time would probably be too much for the Inspire 2 anyway. So here is my first flight, and I'm going to take off and I'm going to pause here for 10 seconds to do the focus. It's then going to fly up top right, fly sideways across here, stopping at each point to take an image, fly backwards, then fly sideways, and so on. So when it has done this, it's then going to come over, and I'm going to land the craft, and then I will load up the second point, which is this one, and that's going to give me the whole of the reserve. Now, you're probably asking why are you flying over here that's not part of the reserve? Well, when you use Align to Grid on PTGui, you need to have all of the image is taken in a grid format. So normally you trim this down so you're just covering the area that you're interested in. In this case, I want all of the images in a block that I can then import to PTGui. So that was my flight plan. So I do the flight and I get my images, and those images, like before, are going to be imported into Lightroom, where I can check and do any adjustments. So here is my image. This is the first image, which is top right, and I have just made some small adjustments here. I've toned down the highlights a bit, put the clarity up and put the sharpening up, and I've applied that to all of my images. Once again, as I said in the last sort of demonstration, do not resize the images because doing this, the stitching just won't work. So just to confirm where all the images have taken, here is my map, and so there is my block of images. So we can step through and we can see where each image is taken and the sequence that they were taken in. So having done that, I do as before. I go to library, I export, I put it into a folder, and this folder is certainly not called Christmas card, but it's put into a folder where I can pick it up in PTGui. So now we will go into PTGui, and I am going to load those images. Here are my images, and I'm just going to delete that one because it's one I did as a test. So I've now moved over to PTGui, so I'm going to load the images in. So here we are in PTGui now. All my images have been loaded in, and as before, PTGui has picked up from the EXIF data that the camera has a focal length of 8.8 millimeters. Now, as I explained before, PTGui was not designed to work with images taken from different camera positions. It was designed for images, to stitch images from the same position. So what we have to do is we need to go into the lens settings and change it to a horizontal field of view of 1 degree, and that will now effectively say that the focal length is 756 millimeters. So that will then is giving the impression to PTGui that these are all taken from a single position way out somewhere. Now, normally what I would do is go into Project Assistance and align images. Now, if I do that, we will see that PTGui will fail. We just wait while these images are loaded in, or aligned, should I say. There are over 100 images, so it's going to take it a bit of time. And we are effectively going to get a message up at the end of it which says PTGui is effectively throwing its hands up in the air and saying, I can't do this. So in a second we should be there. And there we go. So as we can see, that looks absolutely nothing like what we were expecting. And this is classic PTGui when it can't get things right. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go to PT and tell it a new project. I'm going to load the images in again. Go into lens settings, change it to 1 degree as before. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up to the top here under project, and instead of align images, I'm going to do align to grid. Now we know from the Lightroom, if we go and look in the map, we can see we have 8 going across, or 8 columns if you like, and we have 14 rows. So I need to tell PTGui that's what we have. So we have 14 rows, 8 columns. I need to tell PTGui also that the overlap is 50% in the horizontal and 50% in the vertical. I also have to tell it the sequence of shooting. So it's by row, it's starting in the top right, and it's going to zigzag. So it's going to start in the top right, go from right to left, then down, and then back, and so on until it's done them all. And we will now apply that, and we can now go into the panorama editor, and there is our image with the our composite image with all the images in their right place. Now we can see that if we look on the track lines on the fields here, we can see that there are clearly stitching errors. Now you can go in and you can manually adjust if you have the time and patience to do that, but quite frankly it is for my purpose I don't need to do that, because we're only interested in this bit here, and if it doesn't line up by a few feet, that doesn't really matter for the reserve manager. So having got that, it's then a case of going to create panorama. The panorama in this case is going to be 24,605 wide by 27,000 deep. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reduce that to 50% and create the panorama. Okay, so it's created the panorama. So if I go into Finder now, I should be able to find that. And there is my composite stitched image. And that is fairly high resolution as before. So there we go. That's a way of doing some rather difficult surveys where you have trees or water, and it's where you can use PTGui for something that really was not designed to do, but it is incredibly useful. I found that none of the other apps, Drone Deploy, Pix4S and so on, are able to stitch like wooded areas or water and so on. So this for me with PTGui is a big advantage. So I hope you've found this useful. Obviously welcome any comments, and look forward to doing the next one for you. Thank you very much.